Welcome to the studio. I'm Kami Enzerum, and our distinguished panel is going to be talking about simplifying IT for better experiences. Simple, huh? I'm going to start with you, Ian Rutherford. Give us the helicopter view. You work for Cisco and work across many industries, many different clients. What does simplifying mean?
I knew I'd be in the hot seat to start with. So simplifying for us, it sort of sits in two categories. One from a sort of end user experience. So for example, we've seen a massive shift in how our users in our own organization, never mind our clients, have a very different expectation as to what they will receive and how they will take IT. Whereas in the past, it was always IT dictating to the user, this is what you will receive and how you'll get it. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a big shift in sort of demand from our user base and how they want to work with IT in terms of self-help, but also in terms of how they participate in hybrid work, for example, is a massive topic, not just for us, but also for our clients. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of like the sort of consumer end of it, but there's also a big simplification task required on the back end, because every time we innovate, every time we bring new services to the business or to their customers, we actually make IT more complex. Mm-hmm. So we add more applications, we add more infrastructure to it, and there's a big need at the moment, especially now, a big need at the moment to actually simplify a lot of that and get rid of as much of the operational component as possible, because that's where all the money's going. So, we talk about capability, but a lot of this is financial as well, is where does IT spend its money to enable simplification? So if we can't get the money out of operations, it's very difficult to put it back into projects and development and new things.
Which one imagines is the challenge that people in IT functions so often face, right? But I just want to dive into something, that kind of change in the level of engagement that you note. Is that because people are actually getting more educated, they know more, and therefore they demand more, or is it more complex than that?
I think it's partially education, because there's so many of the platforms that you see that are out and available, like in collaboration. They used to be the sort of sole source of an enterprise IT department, but they're now ubiquitous in the world. So people come into a job or into an enterprise and they expect things to be a certain way, right? Which traditionally you just got what you were given. You got given a lockdown laptop which you couldn't do anything on. You got given an IT service that you weren't allowed to change. All those things. So I think there is a big education that has come from people coming into the business, but I think there's also there's no doubt about it, the last 24 months has significantly changed people's expectation of what they expect back from the IT department and how they want to work. And people see that as a big part of their choice as to where they choose to work as well. It's not just can you provide me the service, but is actually this the way I want to work, and is this going to suit me in my aspirations as an individual? And that has most definitely changed.
Joanna, Pan-European bank, UniCredit, what have you seen change in the last 12, 18 months?
I think, what my colleague here shares as far as the last 24 months being really a paradigm shift globally around the world, right? So post-COVID, expectations have changed, experiences have changed, there's different demands, the bar is much higher. Specific to UniCredit, in the last 12 to 18 months, nearly 24 months now, we've been on a digital transformation journey. And this topic of simplifying IT for better experiences is really at the core. So we see simplification of IT across two dimensions. One is the customer experience. In terms of looking at simplification of their interactions with us. And
when you say customer, you mean the high street customer?
Yes, so both our retail banking customers as well as our corporate customers, right? Because UniCredit offers products and services across both. But simplifying that customer experience is not designing a sexy or a fancy user interface, right? It's really looking at the end-to-end experience they have. And simplification within our business is looking at the business processes, the operational processes, looking at the products, the services, the whole end-to-end experience front to back, and really harmonizing and streamlining those business processes, because that then has a direct impact on the IT landscape and the customer experience. So simplifying the business processes and the workflows, and that is what's driving a customer experience, not just inventing or innovating, new products and services on top of an already complex landscape.
But bring that to life, and not necessarily about innovating new products, but from a customer experience. What does it actually look like? What are we talking about?
In a tangible way, it would be a service offering or an experience that the customer has that's simple, that's seamless, that's frictionless, fewer steps in the process. So instead of signing, 27 times on paper, there's a digital signature and it's a two-step process, right? Literally looking down at our processes and what was involved for a customer to go through a mortgage or personal loan, and really breaking down, challenging the steps in the process, challenging rules that have existed in the organization that may or may not be relevant today, and really looking at the modernization of that. So it's the actual in-person experience. It's also simplifying in terms of being able to access through multiple channels, having an omni-channel experience, not having to go to the branch to do certain things. So past traditional models where you'd go to the branch to do certain activities. You would, do certain activities on your e-banking. You do certain activities on your mobile. So this ease of simplicity, right, requires fundamentally rethinking the processes and how we are delivering, not just simply delivering on top of, the existing environment.
So I want to get a perspective from an African bank. Ronald Martey, speaking to us from Accra, GCB Bank. What does simplification mean for you? How does it show up for your processes and, crucially, in the real world for your customers?
Essentially, we have customers that are looking at ease of use of our digital channels, how simple it is to use them, how frictionless, how seamless it is. But beyond that as well, I think that the consumer is becoming more sophisticated in a way. In that you have consumers now who are more focused on, let me say, what organization stands for, the purpose, the value the organization brings to the table, rather than what they can buy from the organization. You have customers gravitating more towards brands they can trust. Trust has now become a leveler beyond just availability of the platform, how seamless the platform is, but then also the brand, what organization stands for. I think that these are things that have become key for customers as far as decision making is concerned.
And what about innovation? Because we so often hear that actually in a digital space where you haven't got so many of the legacy inertia, from copper wire to very, very glacial systems, that actually innovation in a kind of African finance space can really lead to very, very quick and interesting solutions.
That's very true. And for me, underneath all that innovation, let's talk about APIs and the role APIs have played enhancing customer experience. Through APIs, you can integrate various platforms into one single pane of glass. So you have a customer using our mobile app, for instance, who from that same mobile app can top up credit from a telecom or a telecom communication company, or can top up credit for a smart meter from a utility company, or from one single pane of glass. What is fast tracking this or fueling this innovation is, again, I'll say is APIs and how they've simplified how a lot of applications now talk to each other.
Can you do that without an incredibly complex, the kind of smartphone that a 13-year-old kid in London or Milan may have, but a user of services, let's say a farmer who needs credit, or to take one example, how do you deliver that kind of simplified tech solution when people haven't got $1,000 handsets?
Sure. So for the bank where I work, I mean, beyond coming up with a mobile app for high-end users who use smartphones, I mean, we have some of our customers who use feature phones. And so for these customers, we have a variant of our mobile platform, which is in a USSD form. USSD is very old technology, where you dial a certain short code and then a menu pops up, and then you follow the prompt to either want to top up credit or to want to pay a utility bill. So for our customers who are using those kinds of phones, a USSD platform is the go-to platform or product.
Ronald, thank you very much indeed. There are obviously parallels, Graeme, between banking and insurance, and you led a massive transformation program. Just talk us through it. What was the biggest challenge?
I think there's lots of companies, insurance companies particularly bad for it, and probably a lot of financial services companies. It's the legacy versus the new. Right. We built out a huge number of new platforms, new functionality, but we also had many, many legacy platforms that were far too expensive to change. And so driving that customer experience, driving that hyper-personalization, question set removal, data enrichment is great. But if you've got all these legacy systems, how do you interface them? How do you use those APIs? How do you get them updated? How do you not, by generating new services, you're making it much less simple, which is the anti of what you're trying to achieve. So I think it's a really fine balance as to how you architect the solutions to ensure that maybe you don't need to dive into a legacy system so quickly. You try and put them, cotton wool around those legacy systems, extrapolate data out, use different methodologies, use data. The proliferation of data tools is so good now. So you've got to work around that. But I think it's been very difficult. People, users, you get one first impression, be it a customer, be it an internal user. When you log onto a system, when you buy an app, you go onto whatever it is that you're doing, if it's not easy to use, you're already losing people on that journey. So you've got to be there and you've got to be quick. And that doesn't work with a system that takes 60 days to put a release in. So it's a fine balance, I think, as to where you're trying to drive. But as the last 24 months has shown us, you can be nimble, you can be quick. It comes at risk. The insurance companies don't like risk, so you're kind of you're in the worst of a situation. So it's been very clever, I think, about it, and really planning it out and where you're trying to drive your transformation.
Archana. Insurance companies don't like risk. Were ever truer words said? How do you deliver simplified solutions in that context?
You have to make things simpler for the customer. So if you start looking at from their lens, and there is a traditional way that we offer insurance, like life insurance and property. Yes, we will continue to have that, but we've got to look at, with a different lens, is can we offer them insurance when they need it, as opposed to having something static forever and forever, their life type of a thing. So let me take an example. I'm gonna travel. I am going with my family to Spain. I book my tickets and I need travel insurance. So I do a partnership with the travel insurance, where on a travel site, and then offer travel insurance, right? So it's for the customer, it's really simple. It's not that let me go and book my flights, my hotel, my car rental, and then I will have an insurance for everything. Can I just book and make it simpler and provide that experience through a partner when the customer needs it? With one click, they actually get it. So putting that lens on, looking at other experiences, you see that, hey, this person is on top of a mountain, it's winter, it's ski time. I think they really want to ski. Now, should we push and have a partner and say we have a push to them and say, hey, if you are going skiing, how about having this type of insurance? So like a micro insurance when the customers need it and in a really simple way made available to them. So we've got to start innovating in a different area and different reach. And then behind the scenes, of course, as my colleagues have mentioned here, is you got to look at APIs, because there are applications which have been around and they are legacy. But how do you just figure out how to integrate them? But start always with how do I make things easier, faster, simpler for my end customer, and then connect it to the backend that I need to do.
We've heard a lot about the challenge that so many organizations have about integrating legacy systems and moving forward in an intentional way. Resource is a problem, trying to minimize disruption. What do you advise your clients? What do you know? Because everyone faces this in some regard.
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, I think there is a bit of a dichotomy here, and I was just listening to everyone talking about the simplification of the end customer experience and the single pane of glass that was mentioned, and mobile apps and all that sort of stuff, which is great because from a user's experience, all is well. But from an IT perspective, what's gone on behind is massive complexity, because I think Graeme was talking about that just now. And for example, to surface that application on a mobile app, you're putting content applications in, you're pulling data service providers in. We work with a large auto insurer in the US who developed all their next generation claims platforms on a cloud platform versus in-house. But the data still, the source data, their customer records still sat in their data centers. And the big issue with all of this is performance. So it's one thing assembling that single view, but if that supply chain of technology and data behind it generates a poor user performance, or it's slow, or you have an issue with one solitary data provider that's a long way down that supply chain, fixing it is massively complicated. Actually finding it is massively complicated. And that's where we get sustained sort of dissatisfaction with platforms. So that was a sort of prequel to my answer, and I think the answer from our perspective is we need customers to look at that core infrastructure that's there and how they are connecting it together, because if that performance isn't delivered, no matter how good that single pane of glass is, if it doesn't deliver data instantly, correctly, then the user experience is going to be bad. So, today that's the piece that we spend our time working with customers on, is how can we simplify those infrastructure components so that data and connectivity gets served in the right way for that new model versus the old way, which is everything in a data center, life was simple, supposedly.
Dr. Boyd, you're
Fergus is fine.
Fergus is fine. You're a deep thinker on these matters. Simplification crops up in many.
I seem to be the outlier here, apart from Cisco, and I use a lot of Cisco routing equipment. In my world, big airlines, boutique airlines, and then hospitality, I think we could help you there, because we have a single customer view, and that single customer view and mobile are the two pieces that simplify the journey of my high-end net worth travelers. And what I'm doing at the moment is literally ripping out legacy systems and putting in either kind of best of breed and then linking them together, back to the API question, or potentially a single platform that has a single customer view. But in terms of what the customer wants, it is just let me get to my room, let me check my dog in, let me check my kids into the kids zone area. And they want to do their own stuff online. So they buy a room, and then we allow them the single customer view, the online profile, to basically do everything else themselves. We are bringing in people who want to be app-centric, so they're used to using WhatsApp and Twitter, etc. If they are given a green screen or look-alike green screen thing, they will walk away and go to the Pret or the other hotel down the road. So they have to have a great experience, make it easy for them. But it really is all about the customer, and the single customer view is the shared piece. But the customer is designing their own holiday, basically, and they're adding to their own portfolio. And that's the bit that we can glue together. So yes, it's either one, not many of them, but one platform that kind of does everything relatively well, or my preference is best of breed and plug them together, which is the API approach.
But it's all well and good saying the customer has got to have a seamless experience.
They're paying my wages, they're paying hotel wages.
Right, indeed they are, but somebody's got to pay the wages of the business. And when you say that we're ripping out this system and the CFO says, no, you're not, then what do you do?
It's all business case. A lot of these are based on improved customer retention, improved conversion rates. My background is digital and IT, so we're also ripping out old IBE internet booking engines, putting in more effective booking engines. And with a bit of AI behind the scenes and some of these things, we can actually we can tell where customers are, what they're doing, what they're thinking, and give them a better experience online. And that's the business case. They will self-convert more effectively.
We'll come to you in a second, Joanna. Archana, you wanted to respond to Fergus.
Yeah, I actually was agreeing that yes, you've got to figure out an approach where you are able to provide a better experience from a UI perspective, and behind the scenes you've got to hide the complexity. And but how do you make sure the reliability stays, right? So the reliability aspect is from an operations perspective. How do you have alert at every point, whether it is a legacy database or you have an API which could be down, or you could have behind the scenes some of the servers which could go down, so there could be a problem. So at every aspect, you got to make sure that you are creating, generating alerts, which what we do in operations. And you pick anybody from operations, from IT operations, you would see that they just have an alert fatigue, because there are thousands and thousands of alerts which are created. And what we are doing right now is using AI to filter down the alerts and the ones which are most actionable, right? And we know what action to take. Then instead of waiting for a person to act, automate that action. And so build that like a closed loop. So bringing that reliability in to give the customer the confidence that when you need it, our systems will be up, right? That aspect is super important, and that's need to be built in. So to your point, using the technology for simplifying that experience and keeping a high availability.
Just to follow on that, so I exactly agree with SolarWinds. Literally, we turned off the alerts because we had blizzards of alerts, which was bad news when the real things happened in previous companies. But nowadays, it's very much dashboard oriented. So the check-in people will know this person hasn't paid, or this is down. So they get an alert from their very first page when they log on in the morning. And they're aware of what might be the issues during the day. So it is that kind of proactive. Tell people before they need to know. But the systems these days are designed that way.
And Joanna, in banking, systems can't go down. I mean, not that they can in hospitality, but it's,
No, I mean, they're systemic, critical applications, right? And so we play a major role in the communities and in the overall global financial ecosystem for certain. I wanted to come back to Dr. Boyd's point, right? To Fergus' point, is you talked about ripping out the mainframes, which is, or legacy applications, which is completely fair point. But I think we also, at least in banking and even insurance, I would argue we have to figure out a way that we're delivering business value and coexist, right? Because legacy and mainframe isn't necessarily all bad. They've been functioning for 20, 30 years. We need to figure out a way to balance the business value, right, in the business case, and envelop mainframe, envelop legacy, whether it's through build and operate or buy and adapt through APIs. Also looking at a decoupling layer, some, kind of integration layer, right? So, while it is I think every organization's dream to eliminate COBOL or, mainframe legacy, I think we have to also be practical in terms of making sure we're delivering business value. At least that's how we're viewing our digital transformation.
Yeah, a lot of agreement going on. Your kind of perspective.
Yeah, I'm not the business case doesn't stack up, and we found that. Our mission when we started was we were going to take all our systems out. We were going to build all these new systems, and when we built a beautiful microservices-based architecture, we could shift things out, proper reusability. It was expandable. It was fantastic, but you can't build it quick enough, and the business case starts to wane when you're like, well, I need this one slightly different, so I need to build 6 microservices or adapt them. But there's only like X number of million on that book, and so the business, it does start to get into a different category. And the speed of change is so high, from a customer perspective or end customer or user perspective, that if you're trying to change it as well, the business cases start to really clash into each other, and I think you can't be competitive. I mean, 90% of businesses can't keep up with the change they need to do to a customer expectation and keep being profitable. So if you start with back end as well, real proper back end, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. So you have to be, I think it's just choosing which pieces you do, where you're going to get the most value from.
Pick your battles.
And it comes back to balancing the risk, right? And making sure that at the end of the day, at least as a systemic organization, a systemic bank, you need to make sure the resiliency, the stability, the reliability is there first and foremost. So you need to balance that level of risk and change as hard as you want to accelerate and run forward on a transformation and simplification.
Ronald, Martey, how do you balance that risk that Joanna was just describing?
All right. So before I talk about that risk or about legacy systems and mainframes, I think that I want to tackle simplification from a data perspective, where largely for a lot of organizations, you have customer data, employee data sitting across various systems within these environments. I think that consolidating this data is key, especially customer data. The more you're able to consolidate customer data into data warehouse platforms or data clusters, for instance, you are able to run analytics on this data, get more meaning or more information about your customers. And I think that goes a long way in helping develop platforms that are personalized and customized to your customers. I think that goes a long way to increase or improve customers' experience on digital platforms. So I thought I should mention that. But on the legacy bit, I totally support all the comments that have been made in relation to balancing the act, looking at the business value, looking at ways that we can be proactive in monitoring these legacy systems. But also beyond that, it makes sense to begin to look at, for me, what kinds of data can I move on to platforms like the cloud that would not impact privacy and security regulations. And so with that in mind, I mean, you can begin to gradually move the non-critical systems or platforms onto cloud platforms, just so that at least you're able to run a hybrid until the time that you deem fit to say that, okay, look, we need to decommission this legacy systems. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
And if we take a step back and we think about the simplification challenge as one of innovation and implementation, it's about people, and it's about creating work cultures where ideas are valued, where leadership listens to the people that are actually doing the work, and there is good communication. Ian, how do we do that?
I think I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective on the answer to this, because there's obviously the talent management part, but I actually think there's a more fundamental issue, which is how IT departments are funded in the first place. So if you just look at the infrastructure side of an IT organisation, so 48% of the IT budget sits in the operate infrastructure side, of which probably 15, 18% of that slice goes into change. So if that amount is so small, or it's a very small amount of the total spend associated with running that IT component for infrastructure, it's very difficult to develop talent that actually is associated with change and being associated with the business needs and having that skill set rather than having an operational skill set. So until we unwind the operational spend and invest it into change, it's very difficult to attract the right sort of talent that actually wants to do that type of work, as opposed to the traditional, I don't want to sound sort of put it nastily, but the backroom, back office type of traditional IT folk that a lot of the business people perceive IT to be. So I'd say that's a sort of prerequisite to talent.
So I'm glad that you brought this point up, because we've been talking about the customer experience and simplifying IT. And as part of the digital transformation at UniCredit, not only are we hyper-focused on the customer experience, but also the employee experience. It is a dedicated pillar as part of our digital transformation program. And what we've done and what we found, and research and studies have shown as well, is that when you have an employee experience that's positive, that's constructive, right? The employees are more engaged, they're more productive, and as a result, it translates in an indirect way to the customer experience with the work that they are doing. So we've invested in a modernization program of the workplace environment that creates, across the pan-European locations that we're in, for the employees, a common space, a common way to speak, to work, to collaborate, which has been hugely useful, particularly with the hybrid and the remote work, post-COVID. And so employees have found different ways to innovate, different ways to collaborate, and it gives them the space, and it fits their work-life schedule, right? But we do it in a way that also creates, as I said, a positive experience for them, which then translates to the customer experience. And the last point we found in this dedicated pillar of investing and focusing on the employee experience is when we went to look at the local environments in the various countries, the local workplace environments, there were inherent, ingrained processes, ways of working, ways of thinking that were a bit legacy, but then also translating to how we were servicing our customers, or translating to how we were developing and delivering products and services to our customers. So by making that investment, by creating a different employee experience, it is touching the customers as well.
Ronald, where do your best internal tech solutions come from? Who are the best innovators?
So with my team, I would say that it cuts across. On the cybersecurity front, I have a very dynamic young team. As much as possible, I get a lot of ladies to join that space. Cybersecurity is presumed to be a male-dominating field, and so we find innovative ways to make cybersecurity attractive to young ladies within organization where I work, and so you have a lot of these young ladies who have joined the team, who are interested in SOC operations and identifying threats on the network and so on and so forth. But ultimately, for me, I think that attitude is key. The kind of people that I select to work in my team. I think attitude is everything. Well, having a right attitude is an enabler. I mean, to ensuring that for anybody starting off in any field, I mean, that person is able to build that right skill sets and professionalism to grow in that space. And so from an innovation perspective, these young people are hungry, I mean, to learn, to know more. And for me, one of the things I always tell them is that the focus shouldn't just be on Ghana or in Accra. Think global, and you shouldn't be focused on being a local champion within your space. Try and then compete with peers outside Ghana and all over the globe.
I love that you've thrown the focus to the youth and the future, because sadly time is against us. And I'm going to start with you, Ronald, as we're talking to you anyway. Your one top tip for a technology leader seeking to simplify in the interest of customers. What's your one top tip?
Okay, I think I alluded to that earlier. I think that I will focus on the data, getting to know the kind of customer data that you have, and being able to mine that data to better channel or develop digital platforms that would suit your customers. So I think for me, data is key.
All about the data. Archana, top tip.
Technology folks get very enamored by technology. So my advice would be get to learn about the customers and really well and how and where they need us.
Remember the people.
It's all about the people.
Fergus, all about the people.
I'd be slightly different, agree with all of that, but I'd say don't be afraid of shadow IT if you want to simplify organizations. So in my days in British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, I set up what I called IT light teams, LITE, tiny group of people who did basically, I call it 2+2 model. So two days to work out what was needed, the business analysis piece, and 2 weeks to deliver it. And in Virgin, I think it worked better in Virgin. We delivered 300 projects in a year. I used the T-shirt model, so small, medium, large, extra large, but nothing was more than about 2 or 3 weeks long. And they lived within a suitability filter, so we didn't touch GDPR or PCI type things. But we complemented the mainstream IT delivery team who were doing the bigger ERP solutions and made IT look good, but also delivered things that were interesting and different. And there were chatbots and there were SMS bots, but it was fun and funky.
That's more than one tip.
That's more, sorry. I have a book on it.
Graeme.
I think you've just got to look at the whole organisation that you manage, and that's part of it. Innovation comes from different areas. If you want to simplify, you need to understand the customer. Don't silo your teams. Don't have just people working on all the fun stuff. You do all the customer innovation and have back-end teams that aren't included. You'll soon ruin your own team. You'll ruin your organisation. I think being all-encompassing and allowing rotation, that's how you'll get a simplified system and a simplified customer experience too. If you don't blend them together, it doesn't work.
People have got to have a bit of a broader spectrum and engagement. Joanna?
Last, so one tip, we didn't really talk about it here explicitly. It was maybe embedded in what some of us said, but I would say change management. So even though we think simplification of IT is all about IT, there is an element of executive sponsorship, a relentless focus, simplification being a part of the culture, being a part of the DNA. And so the technology problems, while they may not be perfect solutions, we can solve. You always have constraints of budget, war on talent, but do not underestimate the change management, the sponsorship, it being a part of your culture. It's not a one and done marketing pitch, marketing slogan, and then you move on to the next trend.
That resonates, Ian, for you.
Oh, big time, yep. So I would put mine as an and on exactly what you just said. So get to grips on that legacy infrastructure and work out the plan as to how you're going to either contain it or replace it, because that's the source over time where the fundamental shift in investment will move from keeping the lights on to change, which is ultimately what we want to achieve.
And there you have it. Keeping the lights on, our brilliant panel. You've been watching Simplifying IT at the studio. I'm Kami Nzeram. Thanks for watching.